It was supposed to be just another cold night on patrol, but when Officer Ethan's K9 suddenly stopped and barked into the snow, he found an old man lying motionless beneath a flickering streetlight. Something in the man's eyes felt strangely familiar, like a memory long forgotten. Ethan took him home, never realizing that this single act of kindness would uncover a secret buried for decades. A secret that could destroy him, or heal everything he'd ever lost. What happened next will leave you breathless. Before we start, tell me where you're watching from? Drop your country in the comments. The wind that night sliced through the city like a blade of glass. Portland's downtown was a wasteland of frozen breath and flickering neon, the kind of cold that turned silence into something sharp. Snow drifted over the cracked sidewalks, swirling around lampposts and settling on the hoods of sleeping cars. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded, swallowed by the storm. Officer Ethan Cole, age 35, sat behind the wheel of his patrol SUV, gloved hands resting on the steering wheel. His eyes, pale gray, steady, and tired, watched the falling snow with the kind of quiet that only men used to solitude could hold. Ethan had a clean, angular face. His brown hair cropped short, the faint lines near his eyes hinting at years of night shifts and lost sleep. Beneath his uniform jacket, his chest rose and fell with calm discipline, but inside, his mind drifted elsewhere, to the hospital, to the little girl who waited for him every morning behind a glass window. In the passenger seat sat Rex, his partner and perhaps his truest friend. Rex was a 5-year-old German shepherd, a large black and tan dog with sharp amber eyes that seemed to read human thoughts. His fur gleamed even under the dim patrol light, thick enough to shrug off the cold, but his ears twitched with every sound. To most officers, Rex was a K9 unit, trained for obedience, for the chase, for danger. But to Ethan, Rex was family, the one being who understood silence as fluently as words. The radio crackled, breaking the hush. Weather Service alert. Portland experiencing record-low temperatures. Citizens advised to seek shelter. Emergency centers open downtown. Ethan sighed, glancing at the dashboard clock. Midnight. Another long night. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee, grimacing. "Coldest night of the year, partner," he murmured. "Let's hope people stayed inside tonight." Rex's ears perked. His gaze locked on something beyond the windshield. A low, uneasy growl rumbled in his throat. Ethan followed the line of his stare, down the street, past a half-collapsed awning, to a flickering streetlight where the snow seemed disturbed. "What is it, boy?" Rex let out a sharp bark, sudden and commanding. Before Ethan could react, the dog pushed against the door, whining urgently. The officer set the coffee aside, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped into the freezing wind. The snow crunched under his boots, his breath turning white in the air. "Rex, stay close." The dog led him toward the corner, paws leaving prints in the thin layer of snow. The sound of wind whistling through the alley mixed with the hum of the broken streetlight above. Then Ethan saw it. A shape slumped against a brick wall, wrapped in what looked like a torn blanket. He moved quickly, kneeling down. The man was old, maybe 70, with a thin frame and a beard like frost. His face was pale, cheeks hollow, lips bluish from the cold. He wore a threadbare brown coat, boots that didn't match, and a wool hat pulled low over tangled white hair. His hands were bare, fingers trembling. Ethan pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. Faint pulse, but still there. "Hey, sir," he said gently, his voice low and steady, the way one speaks to the edge of life. "Can you hear me?" The old man stirred, his eyelids fluttering. His voice came out as a rasp. "Cold. Too cold." "I've got you," Ethan said, pulling off his gloves and wrapping them around the man's hands. "You're going to be okay." The man coughed, a dry, fragile sound. "I had a son once," he whispered, "about your age. But his mother, she took him away. Said I wasn't good enough. Haven't seen them since. Ethan froze. For a moment, the world narrowed to the trembling man and the snow between them. He saw his own reflection in those tired eyes, the kind of loneliness that lived longer than memory. He swallowed. "What's your name, sir?" "Henry," the man croaked. "Henry Miles." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Miles. I'm Officer Cole. You're freezing out here. Let's get you warm." Henry's lips trembled into something like a smile. "Didn't think anyone would stop." Rex stepped closer, his tail low but wagging. The dog pressed his body lightly against Henry's side, lending warmth. The old man blinked, startled, then whispered, "Good boy," and rested a hand on the shepherd's head. The snow thickened. The lamplight flickered again, casting both men in amber and shadow. Ethan pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around Henry's shoulders. The man tried to protest weakly. "No, I'll ruin it." "It's standard issue," Ethan said softly. "They'll give me another." He helped Henry to his feet, one arm steadying the frail shoulders. The wind howled through the alley, but the SUV's headlights cut through the white storm like a promise. Rex trotted beside them, ears twitching, every sense alert. When Ethan opened the passenger door, Henry hesitated, blinking at the warmth spilling from inside. "You shouldn't," he murmured. "Police aren't supposed to—" Ethan interrupted quietly. "You won't last the night out here." As he helped the man inside, the radio blared again. Temperatures dropping to record lows, city shelters full. Officials urge citizens to remain indoors. Ethan slid behind the wheel. Rex jumped into the back seat, curling up near Henry's feet. The dog rested his chin on the man's leg, eyes half closed but watchful. The heater hummed to life, spreading slow warmth through the cabin. Ethan's breath fogged against the window as he pulled away from the curb. Henry looked around, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's been years since I sat in a warm car," he said softly. "Where were you staying?" Ethan asked. Henry gave a weak laugh. "Anywhere the cops weren't." Then, quieter, "No offense." "None taken," Ethan replied. "You got family around?" The old man looked out the window at the falling snow. "Not anymore. Maybe somewhere. But I stopped looking." Silence settled between them. Only the hum of the engine and the muffled growl of the storm filled the space. Then Henry's voice came again, barely above a whisper. "You remind me of him." Ethan frowned. "Of who?" "My boy," Henry said. "He'd be about your age now. He used to follow me everywhere, back when I had something to give." Rex stirred, lifting his head. His eyes met Ethan's in the rearview mirror, as if reading something behind the man's words. Ethan said nothing. He focused on the road, on the white lines vanishing under snow. But the weight in his chest deepened. At the next red light he glanced sideways. Henry had drifted into a shallow sleep, his breathing soft and uneven. The lines on his face softened too, the kind of peace only exhaustion could bring. Rex, still curled near his legs, stretched and laid his paw gently over the man's boot. Ethan watched, his throat tightening. The dashboard radio whispered again. "Tonight's chill will reach dangerous lows. Stay safe. Stay warm." He looked at the sleeping old man, then at Rex, then out into the white void of Portland's midnight. He murmured under his breath, "Not tonight, old man. You're not dying out here tonight." Rex gave a low, approving whine. The car turned down a narrow side street toward the modest apartment building Ethan called home. The snow fell harder now, muffling the sound of the tires, blanketing the world in silence. Ethan parked in front of his building. He killed the engine but left the heat running. The street was empty except for a few dim windows glowing in the distance. He leaned back, exhaling. "All right, partner," he whispered to Rex. "Let's get him inside." As Ethan opened the door, a blast of wind cut through the night. He pulled his collar up, helped Henry out of the passenger seat. The old man swayed, but Ethan caught him. Inside the car, Rex barked once, sharp and firm, as if giving a command. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, we're coming." They moved slowly toward the building's entrance, boots crunching through snow. Above them, the sky was the color of steel. By the time they reached the door, Henry's head rested against Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you," the old man murmured. "You don't know what this means." Ethan didn't answer. He just tightened his grip, steady and sure. From the back seat, Rex gave one last look toward the street, the empty, endless white, and then curled up again, eyes closing in trust. Inside, the warmth would come. For now, only the snow watched as the three disappeared into the building's glow. The apartment was small, tucked away on the second floor of a weathered brick building that faced a narrow alley where the snow piled against rusted dumpsters. Warm light from a single floor lamp softened the corners of the room, illuminating shelves lined with police reports, coffee mugs, and a few framed photos. The air carried a faint smell of pine and brewed coffee. Ethan hung his coat on the hook by the door, steam still rising from it. The old man shuffled behind him, moving carefully on unsteady legs. "It's not much," Ethan said, setting his keys on the counter, "but it's warm." Henry's voice was gravelly but gentle. "Warm's a miracle, son. I've slept on colder floors than this." His eyes scanned the space. The worn leather couch, the folded blanket over its back, and the corner where a child's drawing of a dog hung on the fridge, signed Lily, age 7. Rex patted across the wooden floor, his paws clicking softly. The big German shepherd circled once before lying down between them, his head resting on his paws, watching every movement. His tail thumped once against the rug when Henry smiled at him. Ethan moved into the kitchenette and started the coffee maker. "Cream or sugar?" he asked. Henry chuckled. "I'd settle for hot." As the machine gurgled, Ethan leaned against the counter, his face half lit by the yellow lamp. "So, Henry," he said quietly, "what brought you out there tonight? It's no night for walking." Henry rubbed his hands together, gazing at the floor. "Wasn't walking, really. Just trying to remember what it felt like to have somewhere to go." He looked up, his eyes glassy and distant. "My wife used to make coffee like this. We were broke, but she swore coffee could fix anything. She left when I couldn't keep a roof over our heads. Took my boy with her." Ethan froze, his hand tightening around the cup. The faint whistle of the heater filled the silence. "You ever see them again?" Henry shook his head. "Not once. I sent letters, got one back, said not to write again. That was 29 years ago." The words landed heavy. Ethan turned toward the photo on the table. Him in uniform, his arm around a little girl with big eyes and a feeding tube hidden beneath her sweater. The memory flickered in his chest like static. "My old man left when I was 5, he said flatly. Didn't even say goodbye. Just packed a bag and went off with some woman who thought his badge looked good next to her money." Henry looked at him quietly. "That why you joined the force? To prove you're not him?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maybe." He exhaled, leaning back against the counter. "Maybe because someone's got to do the right thing, even when everyone else walks away." Henry nodded, his fingers trembling around the warm mug Ethan handed him. "You've got fire in you, boy, I can see that." Rex shifted, laying his head on Henry's knee. The old man smiled faintly, stroking the dog's fur with a slow, reverent motion. "You're lucky," Henry said softly, "having someone who stays. Dogs, they don't care what you've done. They just want to keep you breathing." The sound of a phone vibrating broke the stillness. Ethan glanced at the screen. Lily, hospital room 312. He answered instantly. "Hey, sweetheart." The little girl's voice came through weak but bright. "Daddy, it's snowing here too. The nurse said it's the biggest storm in years." Ethan smiled, his whole face softening. I can see it from here, Bug. You staying warm? A nurse appeared in the background. Sarah Jennings, a woman in her early 40s with auburn hair tied neatly, her calm eyes hiding years of fatigue. She worked the night shift in the pediatric ward, known among the staff for her patience and gentle humor. "She's doing fine, Officer Cole," she said kindly. "No fever tonight." "Thanks, Sarah," Ethan replied. "You're a saint." Lily's voice interrupted. "Daddy, where's Rex? And who's that man behind you?" Ethan turned the camera slightly. Henry blinked, startled, then smiled nervously. "Just someone I met tonight, sweetheart. He needed a place to get warm." Lily grinned, the gap in her front teeth showing. "Hi, mister. Hi, Rex." Rex's ears perked. He moved closer to the phone, tail wagging. Henry's eyes softened. That single glimpse of a child's innocent joy seemed to melt something frozen inside him. "Hello there, little one," he said quietly. "She called me Grandpa," Henry whispered after the call ended, voice trembling with emotion. Ethan glanced at him. "She calls everyone that she likes." Henry smiled faintly. "Still the best thing anyone's called me in years." The wind moaned outside the window. Ethan poured another cup of coffee and sat opposite him. They talked about nothing and everything, about war stories from the streets, about the ache of empty chairs at dinner tables. Henry told him he'd once worked construction, a strong man with hands calloused from concrete and steel. But when the company folded, the debts began. Then came the bottle, the arguments, the shame. "I thought money was the problem," he said quietly. "Turned out pride was." Ethan listened, his thumb tracing the rim of his mug. "My mom worked double shifts after my dad left," he said. "Used to wait up for him every Christmas. She finally stopped when I turned 10. Guess I did too." Henry's face folded into something that looked like grief. "If I'd had a son like you," he began, then trailed off. "Well, maybe I'd have done better." Rex lifted his head, sensing the change in tone, and stretched out between them, placing his head on Henry's knee and his paw on Ethan's boot, bridging the space in silence. Ethan smiled faintly. "He likes you. That's rare." Henry chuckled, wiping a tear that froze halfway down his cheek. "Guess we're both strays tonight." They fell quiet. The clock ticked softly from the wall. Outside, snow pressed against the window like cotton. Ethan stood, crossing to the small shelf beside the couch. He picked up a framed photo of Lily, her hospital wristband still visible on her arm, her smile wide enough to light a room. "That's her," he said. "Lily." Henry looked at the picture as if it were holy. "She's beautiful," he murmured. "Reminds me of my boy when he was little. Same light in her eyes." "Doctor says she's a fighter," Ethan said. "Heart condition, but she's tougher than me." Henry hesitated. "Do you think she'd like visitors? Maybe tomorrow?" Ethan frowned slightly. "You really want to meet her?" The old man nodded. "Feels like I've missed 100 goodbyes in my life. Maybe I could be part of a hello for once." Ethan studied him, the lines on his own face deepening. There was sincerity there, raw and cracked, but real. "All right," he said finally. "Tomorrow. She'll like that." Henry smiled, a small, weary curve of his lips. "Then I owe you another thank you." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." Rex yawned, shifting his weight, then rested his chin back on Henry's leg as if claiming him as part of the pack. For a moment, the apartment felt fuller, as if some long-forgotten warmth had crept back in. The two men sat in silence, each lost in his own memories, yet tethered by something wordless and shared. Hours passed, the coffee cooled, and the snow outside thickened into a white curtain. The city seemed to vanish under it, leaving only the faint hum of the heater and the rhythmic breathing of the dog between them. When Ethan finally stood, he dimmed the lamp and said, "Get some rest, Henry. We'll leave early." The old man nodded, settling back on the couch with the blanket pulled to his chest. "Good night, son," he murmured, half asleep. Ethan paused by the door to his bedroom. The word son hung in the air like a prayer. He didn't correct him. Rex circled once and lay down between them, his eyes half open, guarding the space. As he drifted towards sleep, his muzzle brushed against Henry's coat pocket, nudging it lightly. But the wallet inside stayed hidden, silent, keeping it secret until morning. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, 3 souls, a cop, an old man, and a dog, shared a fragile peace born of pain. The heater hummed softly through the night, filling the small apartment with a steady warmth. Outside, the snow kept falling, thick, endless, blanketing Portland in silence. Moonlight spilled faintly through the blinds, painting silver lines across the living room floor where Rex lay curled beside the couch. The 5-year-old German shepherd stirred slightly, his black and tan coat rising and falling with each slow breath. Every so often, his ear twitched at the faint creak of the building or the groan of pipes. He was always listening, even in dreams. Across from him, Henry slept soundly on the couch, wrapped in a wool blanket Ethan had left him. His gray beard glinted faintly in the dim light, his chest rising and falling unevenly. The old man looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for someone who'd spent years on the streets, the kind of sleep that comes when someone hasn't had a bed in far too long. Ethan's door was half open. The faint glow of a lamp spilled through, revealing his shadow sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. He hadn't been able to sleep. His mind replayed every word from their talk, about fathers leaving, about regret, about second chances. He told himself he wasn't thinking of his own father. But the thought was there, lurking like a wound that never healed. Rex shifted suddenly, a soft thud breaking the stillness. Something had fallen to the floor. His paw nudged it. A small, worn leather wallet cracked at the edges. It must have slipped from Henry's coat pocket. Rex sniffed it, nose pressing gently against the smooth surface, tail twitching once. A faint scent of old paper and cologne clung to it, familiar in a way Ethan couldn't yet name. "Rex," Ethan murmured, stepping out of the room, voice hoarse with fatigue. "What have you got there, buddy?" The dog looked up, eyes glinting amber under the lamplight. Ethan crouched down, picking up the wallet. It felt heavier than it looked. Something about it made his stomach tighten. He opened it slowly. Inside were a few crumpled bills, a faded ID card, and a single photograph, yellowed with time. The picture showed a young boy sitting on a man's shoulders, both laughing, the wind caught in their hair. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The boy was him. 5 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a toy police badge. The man holding him had the same gray eyes Ethan saw every morning in the mirror. The ID card confirmed the impossible. Name: Henry Cole. Date of birth: 1951. Ethan froze, the world narrowing into the space between his shaking fingers. Cole. The same name that had disappeared from his life 2 decades ago. His father's name. He stumbled back, gripping the wallet so tight the leather creaked. No. His voice was barely a whisper. No, it can't be. He looked at the couch where Henry slept, the blanket rising gently with his breath. His father. The man who had vanished when Ethan was 5. The man who'd left his mother in tears and never looked back. The man he'd promised himself he would never become. Rex stood now, sensing the change in his master's heartbeat. His ears pricked, tail low, eyes darting between Ethan and the old man. Ethan's chest tightened with something raw. Fury, disbelief, betrayal. He walked toward the couch, the floor creaking beneath his steps. He wanted to scream, but his voice trembled instead. He dropped the wallet onto the coffee table with a heavy slap. The sound woke Henry instantly. He blinked, confused, eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Ethan?" "What? Who are you?" Ethan's voice cracked like thunder in the quiet room. "Who the hell are you, really?" Henry pushed himself up on one elbow, squinting. "Son, please. Don't call me that." Ethan's shout echoed off the walls. His gray eyes burned as he pointed at the wallet. "You think I wouldn't notice? You think I wouldn't remember my own father's face? Or his name?" Henry looked at the table. The wallet lay open, the photo catching the faint light. His hand trembled as he reached for it but stopped halfway. His shoulders slumped, and the years seemed to fall on him all at once. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he whispered. Ethan's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Find out? What were you waiting for, huh? Another 20 years? Or maybe after I buried you?" Henry swallowed hard, his voice rasping. "Ethan, I've spent every day since I left wishing I hadn't. I was young, stupid, thought love and money were the same thing. I thought I could buy happiness, but He stopped himself, shaking his head. When she died, all the money in the world couldn't fill what I'd thrown away." Ethan took a step closer, fists clenched. "You left Mom crying on the porch. You didn't come to her funeral. You never even called." His voice broke on the last word. "You think showing up now makes it right?" Henry's eyes glistened. "No, nothing makes it right. But I couldn't die without seeing you again." The silence between them was unbearable, thick with 20 years of hurt. Rex whimpered softly, tail brushing the floor, trying to step between them as if to cool the storm. Ethan ignored him. "You don't get to call me son," he said quietly, his voice low and trembling with rage. "You lost that right the moment you walked away." Henry stood shakily, pulling the blanket aside. His frame was frail, bones sharp beneath thin clothes. "You think I don't know that?" he said, voice breaking. "I saw your picture once, a newspaper clipping. You just made detective. I wanted to call, but what could I say? Hey, remember the man who abandoned you? Turns out he's rich now?" He gave a small, broken laugh. "That's not how a father earns forgiveness." Ethan turned away, pacing toward the door. "Forgiveness? You think this is about forgiveness?" His voice shook now, grief spilling through the cracks. "You're 20 years too late. You don't get to come back into my life just because you suddenly feel guilty." Henry's shoulders sagged. "Maybe not, but I wanted to try." "Try somewhere else," Ethan snapped. "Get out." The words landed like a slap. Henry flinched but didn't argue. He reached for his coat, fingers trembling as he buttoned it. His breath came out in thin, white puffs. He turned toward Rex, who now stood rigid, whining softly. Henry reached out, placing a hand on the dog's head, voice gentle. "You take care of him, boy. He's got his mother's heart." Rex pressed against his hand, confused. The dog's ears flattened, eyes darting between the two men. He could sense the break, something irreparable snapping in the air. Henry looked at Ethan one last time, eyes glassy under the lamplight. "You may not believe it, but I'm proud of you. Always was." Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, jaw tight, hands shaking. Henry nodded slightly, as if accepting the verdict, and stepped toward the door. He paused only long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry, son." The door opened, spilling cold air into the room. Snowflakes drifted in, catching in Henry's beard as he disappeared into the night. The door closed behind him with a soft click. For a long time, Ethan stood frozen. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater and Rex's whine. Low, mournful, the kind of sound that tears through silence like grief made audible. Ethan turned away, his face twisting. He pressed a hand over his eyes, but the sobs still escaped him. Quiet, sharp, the sound of a man trying not to break. Rex moved closer, resting his head against Ethan's leg, tail still. Ethan knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur. His voice came out in a whisper, cracked and small. Why did he have to come back now? Outside, the snow fell harder, swallowing Henry's fading footsteps. Inside, Ethan and Rex sat in the stillness. One man's anger, another man's absence, and a dog caught between them, guarding what little warmth remained. 3 days had passed since that night. The snow outside Ethan's apartment had turned into dull gray slush, and the city seemed quieter than usual. The world kept moving, but inside Ethan's chest, time felt stuck. Frozen in the moment his father had stepped out into the storm. He hadn't spoken of it to anyone. Not to Sarah, not even to Lily. It was easier to bury the anger than to untangle it. Rex lay near the couch, head resting on his paws, eyes constantly flicking toward the door. Every sound outside, the mail slot, the creak of footsteps on the stairs, made his ears twitch, as if waiting for the man who wasn't coming back. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his uniform jacket still hanging where he'd left it days ago. His phone buzzed once, breaking the stillness. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something in him pressed, "Answer." "Officer Cole?" a soft female voice asked. "This is Portland General Hospital. I'm calling regarding your daughter, Lily." Ethan's breath caught. "Is she all right?" "She's fine," the voice said quickly. "Actually, it's not about her condition. It's about billing. We wanted to inform you that her entire medical balance has been paid in full. All pending procedures and treatment expenses were covered this morning." He blinked. "That's impossible. I haven't—" "There's a note attached," the woman continued, shuffling papers. "It's signed by someone named H. Cole. Does that name mean anything to you?" Ethan didn't answer. The phone grew heavy in his hand. He hung up without another word, staring blankly at the table. Rex lifted his head, sensing something shift in the air. Ethan whispered, barely audible, "He paid it." He stood, pacing across the small apartment, every breath shallow. He grabbed his coat and keys, stepping out into the cold. Snow had melted into puddles, reflecting the overcast sky. He drove to the hospital, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. When he arrived, the lobby's bright lights felt almost intrusive. The familiar scent of disinfectant filled the air. A young receptionist, Amy Turner, a friendly nurse in her late 20s with chestnut hair tied in a ponytail and freckles across her nose, looked up as he approached. "Hi, Officer Cole," she greeted. "I think I spoke to you on the phone." Her voice carried that practiced gentleness of someone who worked around pain every day. "We received the full payment this morning. It came through a private donation." "Did he leave an address?" Ethan asked, his tone clipped. Amy shook her head. "Just a name. Henry Cole." Ethan exhaled slowly, nodding. "Thank you." He walked down the hall to Lily's room. The sound of beeping monitors and soft cartoons played in the background. Lily was sitting upright, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed bear. Her hair was growing back in wisps after months of treatment. "Daddy!" she beamed, reaching out. "You came early." Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, kiddo. I missed you." He sat beside her bed, brushing her bangs away from her forehead. Her laughter was the only sound that could still warm the emptiness in him. She giggled. "Daddy, look. They said I might go home soon." He nodded, but his eyes burned. He turned slightly toward the window, his reflection staring back, tired, broken, and unsure if he deserved the peace his father had just bought him. Sarah, the nurse from before, tall, mid-40s, auburn hair pulled back neatly, entered with a gentle smile. Her kind demeanor had earned her the children's trust. She had once lost a son to illness years ago, and since then had devoted her life to making sure no child felt alone in a hospital bed. "Officer Cole," she said softly, "I heard about the donation. You and your daughter. You're very lucky." Ethan's voice was quiet. "Luck isn't the word I'd use." Sarah studied him for a moment, reading the turmoil in his eyes. "Sometimes forgiveness isn't a choice," she said quietly. "It's a mercy. For yourself." He didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward Lily, who was drawing on a piece of paper, humming softly to herself. The crayons scattered across the table formed a heart around a stick figure family. A man, a little girl, and a dog. When he finally left the hospital, the sky was turning violet. The air was sharp with cold again. He drove home in silence. As he unlocked the door, Rex trotted up immediately, tail wagging once before sitting beside him. "Hey, buddy," Ethan murmured, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. "You'd have liked him, huh? Even after everything?" Rex looked up with those wise amber eyes, tilting his head as if to say, "I already did." Ethan straightened, noticing something unusual. An envelope wedged under the door, the edges damp from melting snow. No return address, just his name written in trembling cursive. He picked it up, heart pounding. Inside was a single folded note, handwritten on lined paper. "My son, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I lost the right to ask for it long ago. I only want you and your little girl to have the future I once stole from you. I wanted to leave this world knowing I gave something back, even if it's not enough. Take care of her. Don't let the pain make you bitter like it did me. Henry." The letter trembled in Ethan's hands. He pressed it against his forehead, his breath catching. Rex watched quietly from the rug, his tail tapping once, softly. A gust of wind pushed open the cracked window, scattering a few snowflakes inside. Rex padded over to the corner, sniffing at something that had blown in. A worn wool hat, old and frayed at the edges. The same one Henry had worn that night. He picked it up gently in his jaws and brought it to Ethan's lap. Ethan stared at it, his throat tightening. He took the hat, clutching it against his chest. "You found this?" he whispered. "Good boy." He sank to the floor, the letter still open beside him. Rex curled beside his knee, resting his head on Ethan's thigh. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater, the same hum that had filled the room the night Henry had slept on that couch. Hours later, the phone buzzed again. A message from a colleague at the precinct. "Hey, you see this? Some philanthropist just started a charity called Lily's Hope Foundation. Helps kids with heart conditions. Says it's established in your and your daughter's name." Ethan's eyes widened. He searched the link and found a small article online. It read, "Anonymous donor creates Lily's Hope Foundation to help families in need." At the bottom, in small print, the founder's name, H. Cole. He sat in stunned silence. Somewhere in a cheap motel across town, the man who had once broken everything was mending what he could. Across that same night, in a rundown roadside inn, Henry sat on a squeaky bed under a flickering light. His breath was shallow, his body frail. The walls were paper-thin, and the radiator clicked with every shift in temperature. He held the photo of Lily from the hospital, the one Ethan had shown him, her smile reflected in his watery eyes. Beside the photo lay a copy of a small document stamped and framed, Lily's Hope Foundation, established by Ethan and Lily Cole. He'd used his name once more, not to claim blood, but to build something that carried it forward. Tears fell quietly, tracing the lines of his worn face. "You'll do better than I did," he murmured to the photo. "Both of you." He turned off the bedside lamp, the glow fading into the hum of the city beyond. And in Ethan's apartment miles away, a father who had sworn never to forgive wept into the silence left behind by the man he finally understood. The morning light crept slowly through the blinds, painting thin golden lines across the living room floor. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy. Outside, the last patches of snow were melting, revealing the quiet streets of Portland awakening under a pale sunrise. Inside, Ethan sat on the couch, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands, Rex curled by his feet. The silence between them was a different kind of silence. Not empty, but waiting. The sudden sound of knocking broke through the stillness. 3 gentle knocks. Hesitant, almost apologetic. Rex sprang up instantly, barking once, tail stiff. Ethan frowned, setting his mug aside. "Easy, boy," he murmured. He walked toward the door, heart pounding for reasons he couldn't name. When he opened it, there stood Henry. The old man looked thinner, paler than before. His worn brown coat clung loosely to his shoulders. In his trembling hands he held a small bouquet of winter flowers, white daisies and a single red rose, and a plastic bag filled with toys wrapped in tissue paper. His gray eyes, soft and wet from the morning chill, met Ethan's without defense. "I didn't mean to wake you," Henry said quietly. His voice was rougher, weaker. "If you don't want to hear me out, I'll go. But I needed to say I'm sorry, not just for leaving, but for wasting 2 lives, yours and mine." Ethan stood in the doorway, muscles tight. He could smell the faint scent of cheap motel soap on the old man's coat. His throat worked, but no sound came. Rex stepped forward first, padding between them, sniffing Henry's pant leg. The dog looked up at Ethan, then at Henry, then pressed his head gently against both of them, as if trying to close a wound too old to heal. Henry gave a faint, trembling smile. "He still remembers," he whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. His chest rose and fell once, sharply. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. His tone wasn't angry this time, just tired. "I know," Henry replied, "but I had to see her. The little one, Lily." He looked down, eyes flickering with hope. "I brought something for her." The bag rustled softly as he held it out, a small stuffed German shepherd, hand-sewn, its button eyes slightly uneven. Ethan stared at it, a storm of memory rushing through him. His own childhood, the man who used to carve wooden dogs for him in the garage, the one who vanished before Ethan learned to ride a bike. He exhaled slowly, a sound halfway between a sigh and a surrender. "Lily wants to meet you," he said finally, his voice breaking on the words. "She keeps asking about her grandpa." Henry froze. His mouth parted slightly, then closed again as tears welled in his eyes. "Grandpa," he repeated under his breath, the word trembling like a prayer. Ethan stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." Rex wagged his tail once, the first true movement of peace that morning. At the hospital, the world smelled of antiseptic and hope. Lily sat up in her bed, hair tied in 2 uneven ponytails, wearing her favorite pink pajamas with cartoon hearts. Her face brightened the moment the door opened. "Daddy," she called, then blinked at the man beside him. "Who's that?" Henry hesitated at the doorway, hat in his hands, his voice nearly lost. "Just someone who came to see your smile." Lily giggled softly, tilting her head. "You look like Daddy when he's sad." Ethan's lips curved upward, a brief, genuine smile breaking through. "Lily, sweetheart," he said gently. "This is Grandpa." The girl's eyes widened. For a moment she simply stared. Then she whispered, "Grandpa," as if testing the word, then repeated it louder, joyfully. "Grandpa." Henry's face crumpled. He stepped forward carefully, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "You don't have to call me that if you don't want to," he said, voice trembling. But Lily had already thrown her small arms around his waist, laughing. "You brought me a puppy," she exclaimed, spotting the little stuffed dog in his bag. Henry laughed through his tears, kneeling beside her bed despite the stiffness in his knees. "I thought you might need another one for when your real puppy's not allowed inside." Rex, who lay just outside the hospital room door, wagged his tail at the mention, pressing his nose to the glass. The nurse Sarah peeked in, smiling softly. "Looks like someone got a surprise," she said. Her eyes lingered on the 3 of them, the old man, the father, and the little girl, a portrait of something she hadn't seen in years, a family rediscovering each other. Ethan stepped closer, resting a hand on Henry's shoulder. His voice was quiet but firm. "You can stay, Dad. Portland's big enough for both of us." Henry looked up at him, disbelief flickering into gratitude. "You mean that?" "Yeah," Ethan said, squeezing his shoulder. "Lily needs you. Maybe I do too." Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight cut through the cold glass, warming the sterile white room with gold. Rex watched through the door, his reflection shimmering beside the light. His ears perked when Henry looked over and smiled at him. The nurse turned to leave, whispering to another staff member in the hall. "You see that? Feels like a little miracle, doesn't it?" And maybe it was. Weeks later, the Cole household was quieter but full of new sounds. The scratch of pencils on paper, the barking of Rex chasing a ball across the small backyard, Lily's laughter ringing through the halls. Henry had moved into the spare room, helping Ethan build the official office for Lily's Hope Foundation. The foundation quickly became known for helping children with heart conditions across the Pacific Northwest. Henry donated his remaining fortune anonymously, refusing to put his name on anything but the signature line beside Ethan's. "It's not mine anymore," he said. "It's yours. It's hers." On one spring afternoon, Ethan stood at the back door watching Lily and Rex playing in the sunlight. Henry sat nearby on the porch, wrapped in a light sweater, sipping tea. His health was fragile now. The long years of hardship had left his lungs weak, but his eyes glowed with quiet peace. Rex trotted up with a rubber ball, dropping it at Henry's feet. The old man laughed and threw it, his arm trembling but steady enough. "Go get it, boy." Lily ran after Rex, her laughter echoing down the yard. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "Looks like he's got competition for fetch." Henry chuckled softly. "Good. He deserves to share the work." They stood there for a moment, no apologies left to say, no past left to fix. Just the present, warm and alive. As the sun lowered, Ethan turned to Henry and said quietly, "You know, I used to think miracles were things that happened to other people. I didn't believe in second chances." Henry's gaze followed Lily's figure twirling in the grass. "Miracles aren't just second chances, son," he said. "They're reminders that love doesn't die just because we walked away from it. God keeps it alive until we're ready to come back." Ethan nodded, the words settling deep in his chest. Rex barked once, chasing the ball again, his fur catching the sunlight like fire. Lily clapped and shouted, "Go, Rex, go!" Henry smiled. "See that?" he whispered. "That's what grace looks like." Sometimes forgiveness isn't earned, it's given. Sometimes miracles don't fall from heaven. They walk through our front door carrying flowers and a trembling heart. Life will break us in 100 ways, but love, true love, between fathers, children, and the faithful souls beside them, will always rebuild what's lost. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories of hope, healing, and the quiet miracles that still happen every day.